Texas sun.
Hello, everyone. So glad to have you here. Please for those of us that are just experiencing some of the overcast, figure we could listen to a song about the sun by the wonderful Leon Bridges. Welcome. Good to see everybody trickle in. Really appreciate y'all joining today. Go ahead and feel free to head on over to chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. Hello, welcome folks. Happy, beautiful Wednesday. Joanna, good to see you in the Philippines. We got Douglasville, Allison. We're not too far from each other. I like that. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. So glad to have you here. I see it's already popping off in chat. Really appreciate y'all for just joining and choosing to be a part of the conversation today around compassionate leadership and how we can really be more compassionate as we show up in our organizations. My name is Tila Evans, and I'm here from the ThinkHuman team, and I'm tuning in from Atlanta, Georgia. So if you haven't already, go ahead and head over. Let us know where you're dialing in from. I see got a couple people close to me. Stacy, you're in Forest Park. There's a rodeo happening this weekend in town, so hopefully I'll see you out there. All right, I like it. Hi, Laurent. Got a lot of folks in Canada today. I love to see it. Alaska, Slovenia. I always appreciate the international crowd that we have here. So many different experiences. So great to see you all. And welcome to folks who are just joining. Feel free to go ahead and head over to chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. And for folks who haven't been to a ThinkHuman partner webinar before, just know that, being here is an opportunity to not only hear the wisdom of the speakers, but also all of you in chat. And this conversation is really meant to help us take us further in our leadership development, so we can be more actionable in our human-centered leadership. So please take whatever you need from this conversation to really serve you in your own personal journey or in your own organizations, and definitely don't let that growth stop here. So we're going to keep getting things warmed up in the chat. So I'd love to hear from folks who are from all over. What is compassionate leadership? And why is it so important? Would love to hear from folks. What's compassionate leadership? I would love to hear it. And for folks there listening, Nicholas, thank you. I love that. Empathy and listening from Greg. We got Evan here, creating psychologically safe environments, having empathy. I love this. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different aspects to this, and we're definitely going to unpack what this really means and how we can really harness that power to help people be the best versions of themselves. So throughout this entire time together, feel free to show up and chat. Would love to hear your perspectives, connect with each other. Go ahead and put your Q&A, questions for our speakers. And of course, this will be recorded and we'll be sharing it afterwards. So with all that being said, this webinar wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the commitment, the intention from the folks on this panel, and from our wonderful sponsors and partners. And so I'm excited to just talk a little bit about the folks that help make this happen today. The first one is Workleap Office 5. It's really is an incredible platform that's really about empowering leaders to help build high-performing teams through continuous listening. So like a lot of folks are saying in chat, really helping with ongoing feedback, customizable surveys, real-time actionable insights, so that you all can help create a sustainable culture that really centers well-being. And their other wonderful partner today is Pin, who's really about the employee experience. So they're really leading the way towards helping you create consistent and amazing experiences for your employees, helping you to actually map moments that really matter for your employees within the organization. And then I work for a company called ThinkHuman, and we offer leadership development and manager training. So we offer cohorts, executive coaching, leadership offsites, and really we partner with people leaders who are investing in building human skills. So as you talk about empathetic leadership or giving and receiving feedback, that's the area that we really help to elevate. So in the actual webinar itself, we'll actually launch a poll. So if you're curious to learn more about the other partners, we would be happy to follow up with you. So without further ado, in our kind of event fashion, we have an amazing artist today who's going to bless us with his gift, and that is C.A. Williams. So C.A. Williams is a Tennessee spoken word poet, and actually the publisher of 2 books, working on his 3rd. Also the founder and coordinator of Under One Roof, which is a quarterly event that brings together poets, comedians, and musicians, really about the arts. And then along with writing poetry and coordinating events, he's also created 3 YouTube videos from his book, Different Sides, that is really a visual for his poetry. And last but not least, he's also just celebrated his 40th birthday. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you all to C.A. Williams to help ground us before we start the discussion today.
Hello, and thank you all for having me. With the topic being leading with compassion, I first feel that you have to have compassion for yourself. So this piece is from my book, and it is titled Together Forever. I want to start by saying you and me. You and me for eternity, that's the way it should be. For it was not too long ago you left me, you left my life empty. It was like you was trying to play a game of hide and go seek. But now since I found you, I want to tell you that every morning I wake up and every night I go to sleep, I want to feel your presence next to me. For you have such a true beauty and no one can tell me differently. For when I speak certain words, certain poems, certain lyrics, some people may say that I have no common sense. But that's when you whisper in my ear and say, yes, you are different. You say your words may be the healing for someone who's sick. It's because of you, I know who I am. I no longer have to straddle the fence. So I write this poem to you. First name, self. Last name, confidence. From this day forward, self-confidence and I will be together forever. Thank you all again for having me.
Wow. Thank you so much, CA, for sharing your gift with us. And we truly do appreciate the wisdom that you just shared. You're getting a lot of love in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, 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 Tyler, Robert, Greg. I see the fist bump. Linda. I am Hakimia Jackson, Global Executive Coach and DEI Board Advisor. And today I will be your moderator. Elated to be here with you to have this conversation with leading with compassion, building a positive employee experience. As leaders, we're all facing the ongoing challenge for some and opportunities for others of driving results while keeping our teams happy, motivated, and engaged. It's a delicate harmony that we're trying to figure out, pushing from innovation and impact while making sure that our people feel truly supported, valued, and invested in for the long haul, y'all. As the Dalai Lama wisely said, love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. Compassion isn't just a nice to have anymore. It's a vital component of effective leadership in today's volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, complex world we live in. In fact, just 5 years ago, just think about this, y'all. Discussing compassion in the workplace might have been considered taboo. Actually, today in certain industries, compassion is still seen as the not so nice soft skill or not needed soft skill. But now it's not only accepted, it's expected. This generation of leaders understand that a compassionate approach drives both well-being and high performance. Daniel Goleman also captures the essence of this shift by saying that true compassion means not only feeling another's pain, but also being moved to help relieve it. Today, compassionate leadership isn't passive. It's about taking action to support our teams and fostering an environment where they can truly thrive. And guess what, y'all? In this session today, we're going to explore how can we cultivate that harmony in your leadership approach. You'll hear from an amazing panel of experts who will share actionable insight on how compassionate leadership can lead to sustainable, high-performing teams, okay? Whether it's listening to your team's needs, driving engagement, or developing a culture of growth without burnout, we've got you covered. So lean in with me. Again, you're not just watching a webinar, you are a part of it. So your thoughts in the chat are very important to this experience, okay? So please help me show some love, y'all, to Stacy Norwal, VP of People Strategy at Penn, Matt Todd, Director of Learning and Organizational Development at Plan International Canada, and Sam Sadehi, Senior HR VP at Workleap. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the brilliant minds here. And first, starting off with Matt here. I would love to hear your compassion story. Share an experience where there may have been a leader or, again, an instance where compassion was bestowed upon you, and how did it shape you as a leader today?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, hey, everyone. First of all, I wanted to say hi. I want to give a huge shout out to my people at Plan. I see that some of you are joining today, so big shout out. Thanks for being here. And thanks to all of you for making time today. You know, Akimia, I think I've been very fortunate to experience both, you know, being able to receive and give compassion throughout my career. You know, I work in the nonprofit social impact sector. And I think, you know, the most recent or one of the more recent stories really comes from the pandemic. And, you know, a time where we were all in some way or another suffering. And I remember, you know, there was a period of time like we had gone into remote work, you know, fairly quickly, fairly on top of everything. And part of my role was to really like, you know, support and bring the organization along in this massive change where people were really struggling to understand what was happening, what the future was going to look like. And, you know, I found myself at a place where I was, you know, like I had at the time 1-year-old who developed asthma, and we were in the hospital every 3 months or so. You know, I was stressed out about what was going on in the world and the uncertainty and all of it. And then also feeling responsible for, you know, supporting the organization. And it came to a point where I burnt out. And, you know, I was aware enough to be able to speak to it within the context of like the mental health continuum and being able to say like, I am in the red. And the compassion that my leaders at that point in time gave me and the permission that I felt to be able to, one, talk about it safely without any kind of fear that I would be reprimanded or judged or anything like that. And then to actually have one of my leaders say, you know what, Matt, like, we'll get through this. Like, you go do what you need to do so that you can come back. And, you know, I ended up taking 3 weeks of like short-term disability leave. But I needed it. And I think it would have been a lot harder for me had I not had that compassionate leadership and that compassionate support.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I love the part of the story when you said your leader said, we'll get through this. Not you, just you, but we will.
Yeah.
This is a collective effort. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Go ahead. I'm opening up the floor. Come off mute. Sam, Stacy, share your compassion story.
In my experience, when I think back of all the leaders that I view as being compassionate, they all have a common theme, which is in a time of uncertainty or or whatever it might be, they were always there to support me and equip me with the right tools and resources. I think of like, there was a time where it was also during the pandemic, and I was being onboarded. Everything was remote. I was starting at a new organization, and it was the first time that that organization and that team were onboarding people remotely. But I had probably one of my best onboarding experiences ever. And the reason was because they took so much time and effort to really make sure that I was set up for success in my role throughout my onboarding. And when I look at, you know, other examples with leaders that I've worked with, same thing, you know, giving me feedback in real time, immediately, not waiting and delaying it. I know it's not easy to give people constructive feedback sometimes, but it helped me so much and allowed me the ability to course correct. And it also fostered more trust between us. It created a stronger bond between me and that leader, because I now knew that if ever, you know, I'm not going in the right direction, they're going to be there to help me. So you know, as an employee myself, that's sort of always been my experience with compassionate leaders.
Being with leaders that actually see you and see your value and want you to be successful. You're not just being hired as a number, but you're being hired as an asset to the organization.
Right. They're not leaving me to just figure it out. They're there every step of the way and trying to set me up for success. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing that. Go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, I think kind of following along with that, the thing that most came to my mind and I think about somewhat frequently is during the time when I was doing my trainee year and my MFT counseling psychology program, and I was working with kids who were having some really serious challenges and facing really, really serious problems, which I won't go into because that would be a trigger warning episode. But I had, as a person who's like new to the field and really like in the deep end, and I was going, you know, I was in school full time. I was in, you know, doing work full time, and I was so stressed thinking about like handling these really intense situations and having a duty of care to, you know, the people that I was working with. And so, my supervisor was incredibly compassionate and just saying like, okay, yes, let's talk about this, validate your feelings, understand the stress, understand how challenging the situation is. Even for someone, you know, saying like, hey, even for someone who's done this for a while, this is still challenging, right?
Right.
Validating like you have the skills, and also I understand it's scary, so let me support you in the ways that you can. But I really like left feeling like, one, that she believed in me, she believed that I had the skills, and that she was there to support me if I had my own doubts about that, or I really, you know, was in something that I needed support on. So I think about her often because that's probably like the most compassionate and best leadership experience that I'd ever really had before or since.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stacey. You know, that validation and acknowledgement, I think it's important, specifically if we were to look at, you know, the days that we're in. For some people who may not feel, you know, acknowledged or seen, and having leaders that you just talked about to validate you is important. The common thread that I hear from each of you around your story, and I'm pretty sure the audience, the community can relate to this, is these leaders put you at the center. They put you and whatever your needs were at the center. They recognize your humanity and the importance of your presence. And so just thinking about the current state of life right now, because life be life in y'all, right? It's a lot going on, from, storms to, wars, wherever the part of the world that you're in, to just disagreements, politics. Why is it imperative right now for compassionate leadership, particularly in this evolving era, new era of leadership in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, first thing comes to mind is, it's becoming, it's not just a nice to have. It is critical to how we operate. So much of the work, at least in the work that we do, is relationship based. There was an HBR article I was reading a little while ago saying, we're moving out of this kind of knowledge economy and more into the human economy, the heart centered economy. Because technology is advancing, AI as an example, but what it's not able to do is really, replicate those human centered skills and qualities and capabilities, right? Our ability to empathize and use that empathy as a way to inform and direct our actions, the ability for us to really connect as human beings. And so, they're not separate. We don't look at performance and impact and say, okay, we can get to performance and impact without focusing on people, because it's the people that are driving our performance and our impact. And so those two things are at least now, more than ever, it seems, hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sam, I see you shaking your head. What resonated with you?
Yeah, no, I mean, the part about how they're not mutually exclusive, right? And so I think that if we want more productivity, if we want better outcomes, like Matt said, the two have to exist, right? And so we're not just focused on leaders who are going to be industry experts. It's fast paced. Things are always changing. So how does a leader inspire trust and empower and enable their teams to be able to navigate through those changes? When you're a people leader, well, people are unpredictable. You can't control them. They're not like, I don't know, if you work in tech like I do, it's not like a set of code that you can necessarily control, right? And so you have to be able to context switch. And so you have to be on top of, your team's engagement. What motivates them? What are blockers? That's your role as a leader, right? To remove those obstacles so that you're enabling them to do their best work. We are striving for more innovation and creativity and experimentation. So again, you want to create that compassionate environment where your team feels comfortable sharing their ideas, and so you're helping support that safe environment where they're driving innovation. So yeah, adapting to change, promoting more innovation, managing engagement and motivation, and really just being there to support. I think those are crucial as a leader, and that's what helps enable the performance at the same time. So it's in parallel, like Matt was saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like, I kind of try to always like step back and take like the long view of things. And I feel like, for at least my experience was, for a long time, we were very much in this like hustle and grind culture, right? And
Yes.
it was, that really prized a certain type of work ethic, a certain type of leadership, and that tended to be very like extroverted, and that tended to be very like male in its characteristics. And then we screech into like a very turbulent time, pandemic, all of these things. And I think it left people really feeling like, this isn't working for me. I think I'm ready for something different. Maybe I'm ready to try out, what does different kind of leadership look like? Maybe, and I think like if you put all of that together, this is where we've arrived with like this, I think, further embracing of a different kind of leadership, of compassionate leadership, of empathetic leadership, because it hasn't been working for us. Yeah.
No, it's so what came to mind was, this time created space for more of a diverse architect type of leadership. It's not just the one way or only one way. Now you could explore your authentic leadership style. If it's transformative, okay. If it's authentic, if it's compassionate, if it's empathetic, if it's authentic to you and it works, explore what works so that you can bring your best and full self for, whatever environment or project that you may be on. I want to pull Sam back and all of us really just to have this conversation, because I heard you say, something to the effect of people leadership, right? And in people leadership, you leaders out there, I know you have a lot on your shoulders. I know it's a lot going on right now. And you're like, Hakimia, I'm not trying to add nothing, not one more thing to my plate, okay? You're telling me I got to also be compassionate. I got all these balls juggling in the air. How am I expected to do that? And so I would love for you all to just shed some light on helping these brilliant leaders on the other side, help them understand and see how can they do that. And I know we were talking a little bit about that prior to our webinar.
I'll just start by saying that it's true that people leaders have a lot on their plate, but let's not forget that they're also there to help their team members grow and develop, and that means empowering them to be able to take those on, be accountable and take on those responsibilities. So a leader can only provide that supportive environment and give that coaching and mentorship, but ultimately the individual knows what they need best. And so it's more about creating an environment where they come to you. We can't read people's mind, right? And in remote work, it can be even harder to gauge people's energies with the nonverbal behavior, especially if people have their cameras on. So you have to kind of create an environment where people feel comfortable enough to come to you and say, hey, I need this, or this isn't working for me. And that way you're fostering those more transparent conversations where they feel comfortable to come and share what it is they need, and you're enabling them. But ultimately, it's a collaboration, right? It's not just on the leader to figure it all out.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Sam. And I think, one of the things I think is really important for us as leaders is to, one is like to identify and differentiate between the role that we play as being responsible for managing results, and then also being responsible for leading people. And that's always the way that we've kind of looked at it, is like, whether you call yourself a manager or a people leader, we use the term people leader here. You've gone from an individual contributor to now being responsible for the results of your team. And so part of that responsibility, and I think a larger part of that responsibility, becomes leading your team. So that's hard, right? That's really hard, especially if you're really, really good at your job and your organization has said, well, you're so good at your job, we're going to put you into a people leadership role, whether that's what you wanted or not. And so, being really clear on that, manage results, but lead people. And I think that is such a big part. And that understanding, and Sam, you pointed this out, it's like, and I think, it was brought up, is like, part of my responsibility as a people leader in this organization is to identify and then remove barriers for my team. And equally, I don't know, maybe more than not, a lot of those barriers are they're human barriers. They're the experiences we're bringing with us every day, and like it got brought up, it's especially over the past few years, we bring our whole selves to work, right? I bring my anxiety, I bring my personal experiences, and I want to talk about them. And so creating space and giving permission for our teams and our people to be able to do that, ultimately, I think, is going to drive, overall productivity and performance in the long term.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I want to add into that one of the things that you were saying towards the beginning of that, and this is something that I had started to do at my time at Culture Amp, was that I think a lot of organizations do not make it clear what the manager or people leader role actually is, right?
Mhm.
And it's exactly what you're saying in terms of they were a really great IC. Now it's an IC plus do all of the manager responsibilities, which is not how it should actually work, right? Like if you are a manager, you're a people leader, it should not be an IC. Now you do all of the things that you did as an IC plus an entire another job on top of that. And one of the things that I did while I was there was like, and I think it was something not only that managers needed, but like we needed to go through that process ourselves of what do we expect from managers? What are we actually crafting this role to be? And creating an entire document that was like, this is what we actually expect. These are our expectations. If you're going to become a people leader, a manager, this is what that looks like. And this is one of the paths. And here's all the responsibilities. And that was for them, but also for us, because we needed to do that exercise. And then there's also, what does it look like to maybe be a leader in a different form, right? Like what do those different leadership types look like as well? Because it's not always people leadership, and that is a separate skill, and people need to want to do that. But I think that generally that's not that conversation isn't had. I don't think a lot of organizations really thoughtfully do that exercise, which is why we have this crunch of managers, especially in like the middle management level, who are just burnt out and overwhelmed and feel like they keep getting more and more dumped on them. And and I think they're not wrong about that. So yeah, I think that is one of like, if you can do that exercise at your organization, I think that's really helpful for the org. And then when you think about what the performance of a manager is meant to be, all of these kinds of things, it's just a really helpful clarifying exercise.
Stacey, can I add on to that?
Yeah.
I think, something that we as an organization have done, I think fairly well, but we're continuing to, find ways to improve and learn from it and everything, is we don't necessarily take there's positional leadership, right? You're in a manager or people leadership role, but then there's also the leadership aspect of everyone's job. And so about 3.5 years ago, we brought everybody together. We took like 60 staff from around our organization. We have about 350 of staff in our organization. We took 60 staff from all across the organization, and we asked the same questions, but we asked, what does it mean to be a leader here? And we gathered all of that information, and from that, we were able to identify one of them that came up that was everybody said was passion, which makes good sense given the nature of the work that we do. But we identified 6 capabilities that all leaders, regardless of position, are expected to be able to demonstrate. And then we broke that down even further, and we talked about what it is and what it isn't. So when we talk about collaboration, we're talking about what collaboration really looks like, but what it's not. It's not bringing people together just for the sake of bringing people together. It's actually being very strategic and intentional in getting diverse perspective around a problem or a challenge that we're having. And then we broke it down even further by individual contributor all the way to executive level to say, these are the behaviors that you are expected to be able to demonstrate. And so that everybody plays a leadership role within our organization. And if you do want to take that path of people leadership, you also can see what are the behaviors and the capabilities that will support you as you develop them in moving along that path. And that's been something that, and then we took all of our leaders through like 2 years of training, but that's been very helpful for us, not only to be able to speak to it, but also to socialize it.
Absolutely. So, Matt, what I heard you say, and we have a lot of great feedback in the chat, is recognizing the importance to be intentional when developing your leaders. Because, and I read it in the chat, it was going so fast, but every manager may not necessarily be a people leader. And that is true. So developing the roles or the policies that support compassionate leadership is key. and looking at it from at least what I heard you all say is looking at it at a 3-tier process. What does compassion look like as an individual? What does it look like for your teams? And what does it look like organization-wide for the culture? And so with that, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to launch a poll here. So please stay with us. Do not leave. We have more great insights to share out with you guys, but please connect with these organizations. They are selflessly sharing some of their wisdom with you. Continue the conversation and connect with them, either ThinkHuman, PIN, or Workleap, to continue this conversation around compassionate leadership. So I'll give you about 2 seconds, select who you would like to connect with, and we'll continue on with the conversation, okay? Thank you all so much for your time. And so we do have some questions coming in, all right? So one of the questions that we have coming in is from Sarah. How can you encourage managers to foster psychological safety while also establishing these clear boundaries? Because you have people in the chat that say, hey, how can I separate, being a people leader and results? Is that possible in the industry that I'm in? So please, I open the floor up to you all.
I think what comes to mind for me is that it's a daily practice. And I think that, what can often work really well is, and it is a balance, right? It's about knowing kind of, not in where I am now, but in another organization that I worked with, somebody I worked with and I managed and led, we had this thing where we called glasses on and glasses off. And so what that meant was that if we were having glasses on conversations, that was me as this person's director and them as the person in the role that they were in. But if we were having glasses off conversations, that was just like, hey, we're talking as friends, we're talking as peers, we're talking as, as human beings. And sometimes that was really important to establish. And so I think the point of that is, it is about the daily interactions that you have with your people. It's about, asking real, authentic questions that allow them the opportunity to share their humanness. And it's also about having very clear expectations, articulating those expectations, and also understanding what their expectations are of you as their people leader.
I'd like to add that agreed with what Matt was saying on just having those transparent conversations, explaining the why behind decisions. It's important that people understand what's going on in the organization and that it's not just held, in the hands of a small group of people. Like the decisions maybe, but it's important to explain the why, and to be very clear with the expectations. And at Workleap, we use Office Vibe a lot, obviously. And the reason for that is exactly to facilitate those transparent conversations. So you can send in your feedback or what it is that's working or not working for you anonymously. And it's important that leaders have insight into what their teams need. And they take that information and then they bring it back to the team. I don't think that it should just be in the hands of the leader to figure it out, right? Again, it's all about empowering and sharing that responsibility. So whatever engagement scores, for example, you get, those shouldn't just belong to the leader. They're the team's engagement score, and every individual is part of that team. So I usually like to recommend going back with an exercise where everyone's involved in, okay, here are the top things that seem to not be working in a team dynamic, or advice that you all had, or feedback, whatever it was, you'd like more of this or less of that. And I think that it's important to include everyone into that process and to really, have those conversations, if not in a team setting, then maybe even one-on-one. Some people feel more comfortable sharing that privately with their managers. So, again, encouraging them to keep that open dialogue.
And I think adding on to that, I have 2 parallel thoughts that I'm going to try to connect together. One being that I think as we're talking about compassionate leadership, to me, part of that is almost kind of included in like this radical candor of like clear is kind. And being transparent and direct and constructive with people. I think that also means you have to be able to hear what people say as well without,
Yes.
you know, a defensiveness coming up or things like that. So it is like, it is a two-way street. And it isn't just, you know, all, I want to say, I think that it's not just all this empathy going outwards, right? Like it's got to be this flow back and forth. And that includes, you know, being transparent, being direct, all of those things. So that is one train of thought. The second train of thought being that I, like I said, did do a counseling psychology master's. So I have kind of that background and that lens that I see this through as well, is that boundaries are necessary and important. HR is not a, you know, therapist, and most are not trained in psychological programs. Managers aren't either. And it's important to understand that boundaries should exist and they are healthy and and helpful, right? And if there's something where you really want to kind of think about that more, there are things out there that I could recommend in terms of like mental health first aid training. Look at that, see what that is like for people, for anyone, right? Anyone who wants to take that. Look into trainings about trauma-informed workplaces. I think that is also, all of that is an additional thing that can help you create this sense of like psychological safety with boundaries, because that is part of psychological safety, is boundaries.
Absolutely. I want to bring up a question from the community, and I'm trying to find it where I think it was Simrat, and please excuse my humanity there if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. But the question is, you know, what would you say if the glasses of conversation where the line may be too thin and transparency may be used against you? That does occur. How do you handle those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I responded to this in the chat. I mean, you have to listen to your judgments, you know, and your intuition to a degree. I think you have to be able to have enough awareness to know whether or not that's the right kind of conversation to be having. So, you know, you need to know the people well enough. I think you need to listen really intentionally, but also, you know, be thinking as you know, it was brought up, right? Like a lot of what we talk about as leaders is intention, but it's intention versus impact. And so we can have the greatest intentions that don't always have the impact that we want. And so, you know, being clear on like what is the impact that I'm hoping to have by having this kind of conversation. So I think part of it is about like really thinking about kind of like what is the intention and the impact that I want to have by having this kind of conversation. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it's just like relationship building. Sometimes, you know, in my experience, it's been like, I'm going to share this because I think this person needs to hear something from me that may give them permission to feel comfortable enough and safe enough to share back. Never has to. I think that's important, you know, but creates that kind of modeling that that is really important.
Anyone else? So when you were speaking, Matt, you know what I thought about too was creating a culture of accountability as well. We have some organizations that are okay with toxicity and certain behaviors, and retaliation is one of those. And if we don't have the necessary policies in place and keeping these people accountable to their actions, then you're going to experience, you know, and have these toxic cultures that exist. And so just thinking about you all experience, how do you balance pushing for accountability within your organizations without, you know, losing sight of course, having to, you know, reach project deadlines and maintain, as well as maintain the values of the organization? What does that look like for you all?
I think Matt referenced this earlier, but for me, like, if there's anything that you want people to do, you have to like create that as part of the performance requirements for the job, or in the or create like the environment of not only, and this is true with like values, or you know, whether it be compassionate leadership or whatever it is, if you do not incorporate into like your hiring scorecard of these things are the things that we're looking for, these are the things we're going to expect people to deliver on in terms of the performance, hey, this is good performance looks like doing these kinds of things, you know, whatever it is, if it is not embedded in as many different places as possible throughout your organization, it's going to be a challenge for it to actually happen. I mean, and that's kind of it. Like it's the same thing what people say is you can put values up on a wall, but if you're not incorporating that into how you're designing a product, how your customer service is you know, responding to customers, all of these things, it's not going to happen. So for me, it's just, how can I embed it into all of the different things throughout the organization?
Yeah, I just want to underscore how important that is, like integrating it into what already exists. And so, you know, for us, if somebody, when like it's built into our orientation program. So, you know, for example, we do a whole session on values, and we don't only talk about like what are the organizational values and you know, how do you align with them. We actually start with like, what values do you bring with you? And we go through an exercise of identifying and articulating the values that people bring with them and where there's alignment. And if there's not alignment, it's important to acknowledge that as well. We also integrate, you know, values as an example into our performance management process. So at the end of the year, we go through a 360-degree process where our peers help to provide feedback as to how they viewed and saw our values showing up in our work over the past year. And that's really important, because this comes right from, you know, the mouth of our CEO. Is it's not enough that we're getting, you know, we're having impact and we're having high performance if it's coming at the cost of our people and the relationships. So it's not just what you accomplish. A big focus for us is how you accomplish it. And so, you know, the thing I often say is like, it's not that you like hit all your targets. If you hit all your targets, but you steamrolled and steamrolled over everyone around you, and you know, have really like negatively impacted the team, that's going to come up in your performance review.
I appreciate what Matt was saying, because we have a very similar approach actually in terms of our values. It starts within the first day orientation. You know, it's an exercise that we have all new hires go through, where again we align on the values. So it's definitely not the type of circumstance where you have it in an employee handbook somewhere and then you never really look at it again after the first day. And we share with all newcomers that this is something that's really important at Workleap. We try to translate it into everything that we do, from being a team player to the more tactical tasks that we have. And we bring it up in all our conversations, in town halls, in team meetings, and also, like Matt's organization, we have it embedded in our performance evaluation. So you have your leaders and your peers who will comment on how you incorporated those values into your performance, but aligned with what Stacy was saying as well, in terms of, you know, setting those clear expectations, having those open communication channels, and providing flexibility and support for individuals, but again, reinforcing that accountability, right, for individuals, empowering them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Sam. And so with that, we are going to do our second pause here. We are nearing the close of our webinar. I hope you are enjoying this experience. Please stay with us, but we're going to launch another poll just to connect. Maybe some of you may have logged on a little bit later and now you're jumping in, but which organization would you like to connect with and continue the conversation around compassionate leadership? ThinkHuman, PEN, or Workleap? Please identify, and we're going to proceed with the webinar. Give you about 2 seconds. Thank you all so much. for selecting who you would like to connect with. And so, you know, Sam, you talked about that accountability towards the end. And I think that is definitely important, especially the time that we're in where, you know, there are some organizations where they're struggling to find the right talent. There's a war on talent. And for some organizations, they may be embracing the old way of doing things, or things that may not necessarily, you know, be healthy for the teams or organizations. So what restorative practices would you recommend to rebuild a culture, you know, for the team dynamics that reflect compassionate leadership, or a more productive culture?
I think that, you know, encouraging feedback, and people like to give feedback in different ways, whether that's, you know, anonymously or in a team setting, or even individually in a private one-on-one. But really, you know, highlighting, and I mentioned it earlier, highlighting that these team dynamics, everyone's involved, right? Everyone plays an important role in creating that positive team dynamic, which then, you know, expands into the rest of the organization, because we all cross collaborate, right? So I think that as a leader, you have to kind of role model that positive and desired behavior, and coach. Again, I can't stress this enough. Like, you have people in your team who come from all different types of experiences and backgrounds. Some may be new in their career and don't have that same experience as someone who's more senior. And so again, always giving the benefit of the doubt. And when you're giving that feedback, you're taking a coaching stance where you're advising them on, you know, how they can improve, but and checking in, right? Having those regular team check-ins to discuss what are the challenges, what are the successes, and again, just encouraging that open communication and providing a platform where those things can be addressed in an ongoing way, right? Because I think we've said this before, being compassionate is not just one thing that you can check off and say, okay, done, I can move on, I'm a compassionate leader, right? And it can mean different things for different people, and people have different needs, right? So it's ever evolving and always ongoing, but as long as you keep those conversations going, that can help.
I think, Stacey, what comes to mind as you share that a couple things. I mean, one is the importance of us as people leaders seeking feedback and modeling that for our teams. So, you know, it does mean it's hard to do this at times, you know, is to say, tell me how I'm doing as your leader right now. Like, what's working, what's not working, and, you know, what do you want to start, stop, and continue? One of the things on our team that we have a practice of, and we try to do it every like 2 months, 2 or 3 months, at least once a quarter, is we have an alignment meeting. And as a team, we come together and we talk about what's working, what do we need to keep doing, what do we need to stop doing, and what can we start doing? That's part of it. And then we're looking at also interdependencies. What are we focused on over the next quarter? Where's their interdependency, either on our team or across the organization? And then as often as possible, there's also an element of like, what feedback can you give me, whether that's in a team setting or on a one-to-one? What can I do to continue to grow as a leader? The other thing that I use, and we encourage others in our organization to use, is I have a weekly template report. And in addition to a bunch of like priorities and core information that I want to know from my team, there's a almost like a Likert scale of a bunch of different things. One of them being, how well are you, how well do you feel supported by your people leader? How would you rate your well-being right now? Do you feel like you're using your strengths? And what that does is it gives the opportunity for my team to give me feedback and help me to see kind of trends over time, and for us to be able to say, hey, I see you're at a 6 right now. What's contributing to that? Or I see that you rated, feeling supported as a 7. What could I do to make that a 10? And just creates an opportunity for conversation.
Yeah, and I also think that the perception can be, when you talk about leading with compassion, leading with empathy, that that somehow means you're not also clearly setting expectations or holding people accountable. Like, that's not what it means. You're still doing those things. And I think if, there is, again, and there are boundaries, right? So it doesn't mean letting everyone do whatever they want and, like that kind of thing. We're not taking it there. It means seeing people as human beings who are, dealing with life that is lifing, as you said, Hakimia, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's still about being transparent. It's still about setting expectations. It's about being clear. It's about giving constructive feedback. It's all of these things still. And I think sometimes when you say, when people ask that question of like, well, how do you still meet your deadlines? Well, you're still setting expectations. You're still, to be like delivering results. That those are not separate things. And if you find that you are in a position where you're consistently not able to meet deadlines, is there a false sense of urgency about these deadlines? Are there things that you're saying no to? Do you need to prioritize? Like, what are the other things? Because I don't want people to lean into like, oh, well, then it's because you're being too empathetic that these things aren't happening. Like, no, I don't. That's probably not the reason why the deadlines aren't being met, right? So just want to call that too.
And that's a good call out. Yes, yes. It's not like you lose yourself because you're now tapping into something else. It's, you are a dynamic, agile, flexible being. And so you're flexing a different muscle. We use different muscles when we stand, when we walk, when we're active. And that's exactly what you're doing as leaders. And so as we close, if you all just share, one thing, if you could redesign the workplace with compassion in mind, what's one thing you would change or implement right away, or you would recommend the community to implement right away?
My recommendation based on our own experience when it comes to, inspiring leaders to be more compassionate, I think it's start as early as the onboarding process for new leaders. Now, whether that's an external leader that's starting with you or someone who has progressed internally, I think that it's important that everyone receives that same training and onboarding. And being a leader in one organization is different from another, and we shouldn't take that for granted. So you need to, again, set people up for success and be very clear on, as a Workleap in X company, here are our expectations. Here are the things that we expect in terms of values and role modeling and all of that, in addition to business results, right? So I think that, again, starting from the onboarding, but then also keeping that learning continuous, whether it's through further leadership development programs, creating peer learning networks, whether that's external or internal. We have this where we have like monthly pods for leaders to connect with one another, and they can kind of talk about anything. It could be their own development. It could be things that are going on in the organization where they can kind of learn from one another. It creates more collaboration and also just strengthens that connection. And it's nice. It's reassuring to know that, like, oh, that thing that I maybe feel like I don't do really well as a leader, it's good to know that others have the same challenges as I do, right? And continue learning from them, and again, mentorship opportunities as well. I think that that's also very key. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Mine's very simple. I would give you 2 questions to ask your team in the next week. The first question, check-in would be like, start it with like, what's it like to be you right now? Because that's an empathic question. It shows that you actually genuinely and authentically want to know about what's going on in their lives. And then the other question I would encourage you to consider organizationally and on teams is to ask the question, what's the current relationship between well-being and high performance here? And I think that question will really help you understand the relationship, is whether or not people see well-being coming at the cost of high performance, whether or not there's a relationship between those two things, or if you do have a positive correlation between those two things.
I don't know. Do we have a second? Mine will just be very brief. Just think about the rituals that you have within your organization. So are you doing one-on-ones regularly? Do you start meetings with temp checks just to get that kind of continual touch point with folks to see and understand how they're doing?
And thank you all so much for your time. The webinar is recorded and will be sent out to you. So thank you again for your thoughts that you've shared in the chat. Thank you, speakers, for all of your insights and recommendations and strategies that you shared. Continue to go out and be great and compassionate. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.